No.
And I want to show you this. This is my Love is Alive coffee mug.
Yes, tell us about that. I alluded to that earlier, and we got a little sidetracked. So bring us up to date on your solo music.
Well, I just recently released a cover of Love is Alive, the old song by Gary Wright.
Mm-hmm.
And my friends were encouraging me to do it because we had jammed on it in the garage. And they thought that I sang it pretty good. And me not really being a confident singer, I went along with it. All right, let's do it. And sure enough, it felt really natural to my voice and stuff. So we ended up recording a version of it in my garage back in 2018. When I say we, I'm talking about Kelly Smith as a drummer, Nick Nichols as a bassist, and Billy Rainey as these are guys in my hometown of Sacramento.
Okay, yeah.
And they play with me, and they're my good friends, and we jam. Anyway, last year when Gary Wright passed away, and I'm a huge fan of Gary Wright, Kelly reminded me, hey, remember we recorded that song? So I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to pay tribute to Gary Wright and put this song out and pay some respect to Gary Wright. So we shot a video for it. I remixed it and I put it out. And so far, the response has been great. A lot of my Tesla fans and my personal little fan base that I have, they've really enjoyed it. So that's been rewarding. And I did it this month because Valentine's Day and Tesla's not working, Yeah. So whenever Tesla's not doing anything, then that's when I pursue my own solo creative craziness.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, when we have musicians on the show, especially guitar players, we often ask, do you remember when you got your first guitar? I'm going to one up the question, though. In your case, do you remember when you got your first double neck guitar?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of known for that. I mean, you think of double neck, especially the SG, you think of Jimmy Page. And then I think right after that, I think maybe Alex Lifeson and then Frank Hannon.
Well, gosh, thanks for including me in that list there. That's an honor. Thanks.
Trifecta. There's
Don Felder is one of the double neck.
Okay, there you go. There's another one. So do you remember?
I'm super influenced and super influenced by all of those guys. Alex Lifeson, Jimmy Page, Don Felder.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first double neck I ever got was from a place in New York City. It was called We Buy Guitars. And it was on 48th Street. Back in the 80s, there was a street, 48th, 47th, I can't remember. There was one street in Manhattan that was all guitars. It was nothing but guitars for sale.
Wow.
And we were recording our first Tesla album in upstate New York at a place called Bearsville, which was about an hour north of the city of New York City. And the producer that we were working with lived on Long Island, which he had to go through the city to go to his house. So about 2 weeks before we finished our first album, the recording of it, we all decided to go visit the producer at his house, and we drove through the city to get there. And I asked the guys, hey, while we're driving through the city, can we please drive down 48th Street so I can see this Wizard of Oz street that's got all these guitars for sale,
Yeah.
And we did. We drove through New York City, and I was looking in the windows of these guitar shops. I mean, you got to imagine, I'm from a much smaller town. I've never seen anything like this, where there was just so many guitars and like a solid street of just nothing but vintage guitars for sale. Anyway, in the window of We Buy Guitars was a 70s Gibson double neck that the producer helped me buy, and I ended up using it on the first album. And it was a walnut color, dark brown Gibson SG double neck that I used on that first album. And then we got some stuff stolen. We had a truck stolen in Stockton, California, and all of our guitars and amps and stuff got ripped off. So I wanted to get another double neck, and I was on the tour with Def Leppard, and Steve Clark saw me sitting in the lobby of the hotel and invited me to tag along with him to go to the Gibson factory in Nashville. And so we went. It was Steve Clark, maybe Phil Collin, I'm not sure, but it was his guitar tech and me and one of our roadies. We got in the car or the van and went to the Gibson factory, and they were, at that time, this is before Slash and before Gibson had made a comeback, and Steve Clark was like he was the prince of Gibson. He was the only guy really playing a Les Paul so much in that heyday of 80s music.
Yeah.
So they were giving him carte blanche, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Steve Clark was like the king at that time. You know, this is like Hysteria, Pyromania era of Def Leppard.
Yeah.
And I was tagging along, and I got really lucky, and they gave me a double neck that I still use to this day. It's the only guitar I've got left from the old days. It's a cherry red 87 Gibson double neck guitar that I used in all those videos and Love Song and all that stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of Steve Clark, one of my favorite Tesla songs is Song and Emotion. I think that song is just amazing, and you dedicated it to him, of course. What do you remember about Steve as a person? You know, as someone who got to spend so much time with him, tell us a little bit about him as a personality. What was he like?
Man, he had one of those grins, you know, like you couldn't understand anything he was saying because he had such a thick accent. And I'm like, what? I don't understand what he's saying. But he would grin while he was saying it with those, you know, big eyes and stuff, and just made you feel good. He would hang out with us in the lobby of the hotel a lot, in the bar especially. Sadly, that's what got to him, was drinking. He you know, he was such an enigma, a stage presence. He just had his riffs and his songwriting, but he was very quiet, but always smiling. And he actually gave me an SG guitar. The first time anybody of that level had ever given me a guitar. He had an SG, and he saw that I liked SGs, and he came to me one day. I couldn't understand a word he was saying, but he had a guitar and he handed it to me and gifted it to me.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I mean,
one time he was telling me this story. We were in the bar drinking whiskey, and it was me, him, and a couple people. And he was telling me a story about riding a dirt bike, because he had heard that I rode a dirt bike and that I had broke my leg. So he was carrying on and making all these hand gestures, and he told me he rode a dirt bike and he rode it up a tree. He was like, "Oh, I don't want to go to a tree,